Hi, students. This is going to be our first lesson in history, and everybody should have gotten their history book, The Mighty Works of God, Liberty and Justice for All. Okay? It looks very similar to last year's book. You are going to turn to page 1. It doesn't have a page number on it. So if you go to where it says Chapter 1, Proclaiming Liberty Throughout All the Land. That's where we're going to start reading, okay? So, if you guys were all here, I'd let you all have a turn at reading, but you're not here. But I'm going to believe that you're going to be at home reading right along with me, okay? So I want everyone to put your finger on the word liberty, the very first word in the very first paragraph. Some of you guys may be really good readers, but there might be a few words here that are going to be new to you or a little bit advanced. And when you see how they're pronounced and how they're read, you will learn a new word. Okay? So I want everybody to follow me in reading. We have 4 students that joined us from beginners from last year that are not as fast as some of you in reading. So I am going to go slow. Please be patient. Go slow with me. Don't get ahead of me. When I stop reading to explain something, I want you to leave your finger on the word, okay? Don't take your finger off, because then when we go back to reading, you're going to be lost where we're at, okay? We have 3 days of history. So if I read today and we don't get to the assignment, that's okay, because we have tomorrow to work on the assignment. Today, we're going to read and understand the concepts, answer the why, what, where, when, how, okay? And so don't worry about if we don't get to the writing part today. I don't want to make this video too long, okay? I'm trying to keep my videos 10 to 15 minutes. And if we go into the activity, we might go past 15 minutes. Why do we study history? We study history because it's God's story. It's His story. When we study history, you will learn who God is and why He does things and why things happen. There's a reason why we study history. There's a good purpose in it. And we all want to know who God is, because the more you understand or know God, the more you will love God. The more you love God, the easier it is to love um, be obedient and follow His commandments. Okay? Because you always want to please the person you love, right? And we should love our God with all our heart, all our mind, and all our soul. Okay? So everybody should be on page 1. We're going to try to read all the way to 4. I don't know if we're going to make it to 4, but we'll continue tomorrow, okay, if we don't. So, ready? It says, liberty is very precious to the people of America. Living in a land of liberty provides great opportunities and blessings. We have a lot of blessings in our country, okay? Knowing the story of America, of American liberty, will help us to remember how special it is to live in a land of liberty. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was written and signed. Okay, stop right there. Leave your finger on the word signed. Okay. Because I don't have someone videotaping for me, it's kind of hard to move my camera around, but I'm going to try to move my camera without making you dizzy, okay? So I'm going to move this up so you can see my timeline. See the timeline up there? If we go over here, my timeline starts right up there. And you notice it says history. But in the word history, it has an uppercase H and an uppercase IS. His story. History is his story. Who is his? That's a pronoun word because it's referring to someone. That's God, okay? And it starts with creation. Time started with creation. History started with creation, okay? We moved down the line as events started to happen. in the nation, in America, in people. Actually, not just America, because the beginning of the timeline, it's not in America, okay? And we move across, you see a cross up there. The cross, that's when Jesus came into the story. He was born and lived here on earth, and then the timeline continues all the way down. Okay, so if we go down to our timeline, I'm going to go to the timeline of the year 1776. I need to look backwards, which is right about here, right up there. Okay, that's where the time that we're talking about. And both my hands are holding up my laptop, so I can't use my pointer to point. Okay. All right. So in the year 1776, actually, I think I can do this. Let me turn this. Hold on a second. 1776 is right in here, right there. Okay, so for the new students that don't know why we have Independence Day, America, before it became a nation, belonged to England. We lived by England's rules. We lived by the rules that the King of England made. And the people here were not happy because they didn't have representation. They said that if they were going to make rules for America, that we should at least be able to go over there and be a part of making the rules. And that's not how the king ran his country or this country. So they decided that they wanted to be a separate nation. And they became independent. Independent means you're free. You're free from anybody ruling over you. So if we go back to our book, it said in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was written and signed. So they wrote a paper. They came together. A lot of men came together, and they wrote a paper saying that they wanted to be independent, and they wrote down what their rights were as independent people, and they all signed it, and they took it back to England and showed it to the king. And we're gonna go into detail how this happened later in the book, but America gained her independence, and the delegates, the people that were in the house where this was written, it's called the State House. The delegates at the old State House announced to the world that the American people were determined to protect their liberty. In other words, they were willing to do whatever it takes to have their liberty. If they had to go to war, they would go to war. If they had to die, they would die. While the members of the Continental Congress met in the State House, okay, this is where they met. It's a big house. And a Continental Congress is a meeting. It's a big meeting where they came together and they discussed how they were going to become independent. The people waited anxiously to hear the news. What would the representatives decide? The representatives were these men who were having a meeting and speaking for the people who were not in the meeting, because they were representing the people outside, because not everybody would fit in the house and not everybody could speak. So only a few were saying what everybody believed. What would the representatives decide? Would America keep her liberty? Inside the State House, the representatives solemnly declared that these united colonies are, and of right, turn the page, ought to be free and independent states. Okay, this happened in 1776. America was still not a nation. There were 13 colonies. And they decided that they wanted to be free and independent states. They weren't states yet, okay? The bell in the State House belfry was rung, announcing to the people that America had declared her independence. So if you see that picture of that building there, at the very top is like a little chapel, it's a little area, open area, where the bell is hanging. It's called a belfry, okay? So whenever they needed to announce news to the whole town, remember there's no telephones, there's no TV, there's no megaphones, there's no speakers. So they would ring the bell and then someone would yell out the news, okay? So the bell, the people would start coming towards the building so they could hear the news. The bell in the State House belfry was rung, announcing to the people that America had declared her independence. When the people heard the bell ringing, they cheered enthusiastically. Ring the bell for liberty. They were happy when they heard that they were independent. And while we greet the sunlight on the 4th of July, of the 4th of every July, we'll ne'er forget the bellman who twixt means between, the earth and the sky, rung out our independence, which, please God, shall never die. So it's like a little poem, okay? And it's saying, and while we greet the sunlight on the 4th of every July, every morning when it's the 4th of July, we'll never forget the man who rang the bell between the earth and the sky, and it rung out our independence, which, please God, don't let it ever die. It's referring to our liberty. Don't let our liberty ever die. Nobody likes being a slave. You don't want to be a slave. We want to be independent. Okay? The old State House at Philadelphia still stands and is preserved with the greatest care. Thousands of people from all parts of the United States visit it every year. For here Congress met in 1776, and here the Declaration of Independence was signed on the 4th of July. In the State House hung the Liberty Bell. Okay, this building that you see, it still exists today, over 200 years later, and people still go see it. It's in Philadelphia. And the bell still exists, the bell that they ring. It's called the Liberty Bell. The bell was bought in England in 1752 for the State House. They bought it just for this house. It's called the State House. It was then the largest bell in America. Upon the first trial ringing it, it cracked, and it hung unused in the steeple for 1 year. It was then taken down and recast, and with these words in relief letters around its top. So they took it down after a year without using it. They fixed the crack, and then they marked some letters, some writing on this bell, and it says, "Proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." In the hall underneath this very bell, 12 years later, Congress did indeed proclaim liberty. And the joyful ringing of this bell first told a crowd of anxious people that the Declaration of Independence had been passed. For 2 hours, the tones of the bell floated down from above and mingled in the rolls of drums and booming of cannon and shouts of the multitudes below. I'm going to stop there for a minute. Okay, when they rang the bell to announce the good news that the colonies had gained their independence, they rung it for 2 hours. They were so happy. They were booming cannons. They were shouting. They were playing drums. They were making all kinds of joyful noise. They were happy to know that they were free. After more than 50 years of service, the bell was cracked again and could no longer be used. It is now kept as a sacred relic of the past. Although the Liberty Bell no longer rings, Americans still enjoy the liberty which it announced. Americans, turn the page, page 4. Americans have the liberty to choose where they will live. Americans can choose the people who will rule over them. Americans can choose their own careers. Americans can choose where they will attend church. Many Americans do not realize that liberty is a gift from God. Studying history will teach us the story of liberty, okay? In England, in those days, they did not have a choice what religion they could practice, what church they could go to. They had to go to the king's church. They had no liberty, okay? His story. History began when God created the earth. And since the beginning of time, God has worked in the lives of men. God also works in each nation. History is a record of God working in the lives of men and nations. Studying history will teach us why we have liberty in America. It will teach us that each person in America has a responsibility for his nation. Studying history will also teach us how other nations can have the same liberty we have in the United States of America. In other words, we are an example to other nations that if they want to be free, if they want to be blessed, then we are their example and we have a responsibility to live up to that example. Okay, so we're at 15 minutes on our video. So what I'm going to have you do is you can go back and read pages 1 through 4 again if you like. You have a handout that looks like this. It's a picture of the Liberty Bell. So I want you to color this today, and everything on the sides here and the top is wood. Remember, this was over 200 years ago. They didn't have a lot of things that we have today. So this is wood, which I think today would still be wood. Maybe these little decorations here might be metal. So metal is usually a shiny color, silver color, bronze color. And the bell is a metal, okay? The bolts are metal. So color, try to match the colors that you think a real bell would look like, or the stand that it's on. Tomorrow we will write on here a couple of sentences, but we're running out of time, so we'll finish that tomorrow and go on to our second lesson in history. All right, if you have any questions, call me. And this video is for September 1st. All right, talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.